you think of ECW, you probably think of the likes of Taz, Rob Van Dam, and Tommy Dreamer. You might think of 911, the Pitbulls, and John Cronus. Heck, you might even think of Colin Delaney. No one thinks of Colin Delaney. Sorry, Colin. The point is, during its all too brief run in the 90s, the ECW roster was a tightly knit group. Those wrestlers who were too small, too dangerous, and/or too weird for the big leagues, who broke a ton of tables and taboos and put up a huge middle finger to the more conservative side of wrestling. But at the end of the day, it was a company who wanted relevancy no matter how it achieved it. And if there was a certified needle mover on the free market, then you knew Paul Heyman would be whipping out his comically oversized mobile phone and making a couple of calls. So alongside the likes of Raven, Sabu, and the Dudleys, you had some surprising names from the wider reaches of the wrestling world lacing up their boots in Philly's most famous bingo hall. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 wrestlers you didn't know were in ECW. Join us. Number 10, Gangrel. The man with the coolest entrance in WWE history and a love of fanging and banging, me too mate, Gangrel had a blink and you'll miss it run in ECW in 1995 under the name Vampire Warrior. Well, when a gimmick works, it works, I suppose. Gangrel came into ECW and instantly feuded with Tommy Dreamer, all because the angry sharp-toothed scamp was annoyed at Dreamer's association with his real-life wife, Luna Vachon. Dreamer absolutely battered him, and Vampire Warrior started hanging around with Dudley instead, wrestling the likes of Hack Myers and the Pitbulls before leaving the promotion after just a month. The blood-drinking bruiser returned to ECW for one night in 1997, then a year later turned up in WWE. Fast forward to 2006, and ECW was reborn under WWE's negligent watch. Gangrel was actually supposed to return to the brand to work with Kevin Thorne and Ariel, but the Kevin Thorne gimmick sank like a bathtub full of bricks, and WWE nixed the whole thing. Interestingly, while in ECW, Gangrel was also working as an enhancement talent for WWE under the name The Black Phantom, which either sounds like a cool 1950s car or a terrible Vincent Price movie. Number 9, Terry Gordy. Terry Bam Bam Gordy is most famous as the hulking equalizer for the hard-drinking Southern boys, the Fabulous Freebirds, and later as one half of the amazingly named Miracle Violence Connection in Japan with Dr. Death Steve Williams. A former two-time Triple Crown winner in All Japan, Gordy wasn't afraid to smack a bastard very hard in the face, and his hostile and deathmatch work made him a huge star in the land of the rising sun, as well as a natural fit for ECW, even though when he finally got there, he wasn't quite the same dynamic performer of years gone by, a consequence of permanent brain damage suffered in '93. Gordy made his way to ECW in 1996, proclaimed himself the international #1 contender to the ECW world title, and looked to throw world champ Raven about like a sweaty grunge frisbee, but the miserable mosher escaped with the gold like he always did. Undeterred, Terry formed a team with Raven's nemesis Tommy Dreamer, and later took on Bam Bam Bigelow in a battle of the Bam Bams. Unfortunately, Bam Bam Flintstone wasn't booked for the show. In his last appearance for ECW, Terry took on the Eliminators with the next entrant on our list. Number 8, Dr. Death Steve Williams. The other half of the Miracle Violence Connection was also a massive burly brute who loved smashing people's faces in. Again, like his partner Bam Bam Gordy, Dr. Death was a huge star in Japan, and soon the time was right to make the trip over to Philadelphia. Dr. Death's time in ECW, though, was largely unremarkable. He too failed to dethrone ECW World Champion Raven, his loss to the former Johnny Polo in 1997 being the first time he was pinned in America since 1987. Jesus, and you thought John Cena was protected. All in all, the big fella had 9 matches in ECW, mainly battering the likes of Axel Rotten, Balls Mahoney, Johnny Smith, and even Devon Storm, aka Crowbar from latter-day WCW. On the face of it, why ECW didn't do more with Williams is a head-scratcher, but as he was still a big star in Japan, Williams probably felt like he was in a better position on the other side of the Pacific, rather than commit to the burgeoning indie, and indeed return to All Japan to win the tag titles with fellow broad-shouldered boy Gary Albright. Dr. Death later made his way to WWE and competed in a little-known tournament called the Brawl for All. Wonder how he got on. Number 7, Jim Neidhart. Back in the early 90s, ECW was Eastern Championship Wrestling, a small NWA affiliate that promoted stars of yesteryear such as Jimmy Snuka and Don Morocco. Unsurprisingly then, many uncontracted former WWE and WCW stars would pass through its doors, such as Jim the Anvil Neidhart, who rocked up in 1993 for a couple of matches before buggering off back to WWE. What's more surprising was when Neidhart returned to ECW in 1995, by which point Paul Heyman had taken control, turned it extreme, and the promotion was as bonkers as a bag of feral cats. At the time, Big Jim was in and out of WWE like some kind of bearded laughing hokey cokey, and workers gotta work, haven't they? Like his first stint in 1993, the Anvil only made 3 appearances for ECW, racking up the holy trifecta of a win, a loss, and a draw. The loss was against another surprising name, Ron Simmons, with the former WCW champion killing time in Philly before turning up in WWE as a gladiator from the future. As for the other 2 matches, they were against a certain rockin' individual. Number 6, Marty Jannetti. Like Neidhart, Party Marty Jannetti was in and out of WWE more times than Vince McMahon trapped in a revolving door. After being booted out of Titan Towers in 1995, Jannetty joined ECW for a 7-month spell, somehow challenging for the ECW World Heavyweight title on 3 separate occasions. Spoiler, he never won it, being promptly trounced by Shane Douglas on his debut and the Sandman on 2 later occasions. Jannetty also failed to take the ECW TV title off of Eddie Guerrero, but did manage a win against Jim Neidhart and somehow managed to beat ECW main eventers Shane Douglas and Raven in separate bouts. I'm as shocked as you, to be honest. Before long, Marty was back in WWE to team with future ECW star Leaf Al Snow Cassidy, then was fired again and made a final ECW appearance in 1997, tagging with Vampire Warrior Gangrel against former buddy Snow and the Amish Roadkill. After this, Marty didn't return to WWE, instead he went and joined WCW's Cruiserweight division for a bit, which in itself is also pretty bloody weird. Number 5, Sushi Onita. Without Sushi Onita, there would be no ECW. No ifs, no buts, it is a fact. The FMW founder put deathmatch wrestling on the map in the early 90s, paving the way for the likes of ECW, CZW, GCW, and others, with FMW and ECW enjoying a working relationship whilst both companies were at their peak. The likes of Sabu, Tommy Dreamer, and the Dudley Boys made their way to Japan, whilst Mike Awesome, Masato Tanaka, and Hayabusa made their way to Philly. But the diehards wanted Onita. They got their wish in 1998 when the cigarette-huffing lunatic made his way to ECW, teaming with Dreamer and the Sandman to take on the Dudleys. Rather than either the leather jacket chair-swinging Onita or the classic blue and white leotard Onita, instead the ECW faithful were treated to Happy Monk with a barbed wire plank Onita. No matter the guise, it was deathmatch, dream match stuff to see Onita in an ECW ring for the first time, but unfortunately that was all we got, and Onita was one and done. Rumours were that Paul Heyman wanted Onita and the Sandman to face off somewhere down the line, but plans never came to fruition. Number 4, the Steiner Brothers. After a so-so run as members of WWE's New Generation, and before they returned to WCW so Scott could become the big bad booty daddy, the Steiner Brothers had a short run in ECW in 1995. Still rightfully regarded as one of the greatest tag teams on the planet, the Steiners came to ECW at a time when Paul Heyman was trying to diversify the brand's appeal from just blood and guts hardcore wrestling, aiming to get some of the best technicians on the planet on his roster. While in ECW, Rick and Scott faced the likes of Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, Too Cold Scorpio, and Cactus Jack, facing the latter 3 in tag action with the late Eddie Guerrero. While under Paul Heyman's wing, the former WCW and WWE tag champions won the majority of their matches. I mean, look at them, you weren't going to tell them to do the job, were you? In the end, the University of Michigan All-Stars were only in the promotion for a couple of months, but made sure they suplexed everything on 2 legs while simultaneously touring Japan and dropping everyone onto their neck, as is tradition. Number 3, Arn Anderson. Probably the last person you would ever expect to see in an ECW ring would be the enforcer Arn Anderson. Old school, NWA born and bred, AA was nearly constantly employed by NWA, WCW, and WWE from 1984 until his in-ring retirement in 1997. However, in 1994, ECW and WCW had a short-lived talent exchange, with Arn making his way to ECW for their When Worlds Collide event, teaming with Terry Funk against Bobby Eaton and Sabu in the main event. Arn and Funk lost the bout after miscommunication led to Arn repeatedly smashing Funk's knees in with a chair, as you do. The purpose for the talent exchange was to co-promote leading up to WCW Slamboree 1994, mainly because WCW wanted Terry Funk to wrestle at the show. But in the end, the alliance between ECW and WCW was fleeting, as later in 1994, WCW promoted their own When Worlds Collide show with AAA, leading to Paul Heyman turning red with rage and filing a lawsuit. Arn Anderson never set foot in an ECW ring again, but after settling out of court, WCW sent ECW Sherry Martel, Kevin Sullivan, and Brian Pillman as something of a make good. Number 2, Jake Roberts. The late 90s weren't kind to Jake Roberts. Battles with his demons led to him spending stints in and out of WWE, and in early 97 he was once again out of favour at Titan Towers. The Snake soon wound up in ECW at Hardcore Heaven 97, doing a surprise run-in during a Tommy Dreamer vs Jerry Lawler match, where the Snake clotheslined both men and dropped a customary fire promo before disappearing once again. It wouldn't be until November to Remember 98 where Roberts would have his one and only ECW match, teaming with Dreamer to defeat Jack Victory and Just Incredible. Jake's appearance was once again a surprise, with Dreamer pulling the old "oh, I've got a mystery partner" shtick before the Snake showed up in tracksuit pants, cowboy boots, and a rugby top, like your drunk uncle on a stag do. The two emerged victorious after a messy brawl that featured everyone from New Jack to One Man Gang, with Roberts getting the win with a DDT on a ladder on Just Incredible. Number 1, Scott Hall. After a whirlwind few years completely changing the business as part of the NWO, Scott Hall left WCW's warm cash-leaking bosom and ventured to ECW's slightly cooler but also cash-leaking bosom. The bad guy made appearances at 2 house shows in November 2000, coming out as a surprise to Fuji's classic Ready or Not, before losing to FBI bodyguard Big Sal E. Graziano. Now, I know it was only a house show, and I know Paul Heyman is a wrestling genius and all that, but really? You had Razor Ramon lose to Big Sal. Hall did register a win the next night, teaming with Jerry Lynn to defeat Just Incredible and Rhino. But still, Big Sal. However, these weren't the only times Scott Hall was involved in ECW. Former ECW champion and the Clique's 5th Beatle, Just Incredible, once brought Hall backstage as a guest to an ECW show, forgetting that several of ECW's roster had been treated harshly by Hall and the Clique whilst in WWE. After Shane Douglas, Chris Candido, and Bam Bam Bigelow all threatened to stick his toothpick where the sun don't shine, Hall promptly called a cab and pissed off, which was probably for the best.